Welcome from my home to yours. Today we're going to look at the costs to a buyer inside of a contract to take that thing from contract to close. Inside of that space, that 30 days it usually takes to close a home, you are going to incur certain costs that you've got to be able to be ready for. There are proceeds that you're going to have to give to get to the space of closing this home. And so we're going to look at a few of those and help you understand a little bit more about what that looks like so you understand that your cash on hand is really important when you're going through the contracting home buying phase. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to have an option period inside of that contract. That's just what it looks like inside of Houston. Other companies and other states, they call it the due diligence period, but what we're looking at, we're calling the option period. So inside of that option period, you're going to have the ability to hire an inspector and have them come in and look at the home. Essentially gives you the exclusive right to back out of a home when you're inside of that contract. So that for a certain amount of days, you purchase the ability to exclusively back out of the home. Now it's a negotiated tool inside of the contract, but usually you're going to see anywhere from $100 to $500 for a 7 to 10 day period for you to be able to have that exclusive right to back out. Inside of that 10 days is when you're going to want to be able to do all of the things to inspect the home and make sure it's good and make sure that it's a sound space. So again, it's a negotiated element, but it is generally a space where you're going to have to spend money to be able to get that exclusive right to back out of that contract, that option period. The second thing we want to look at inside of that contracting phase is going to be the earnest money. The easiest way to really understand earnest money, it's like a deposit that you're putting down saying, no, I am buying this home and this is my commitment to buy this home by putting a certain amount of proceeds to that. Earnest money is yours and it's held by an escrow company, it's held by a title company, and they're going to keep this money on hand, and then once you get to the closing table, that money is yours. It comes back into your space, but it does have to come out of your bank. It does have to be cashed by the escrow company, by the title company, and it is held in escrow through the duration of the contract. And so usually you're going to see that earnest money. Again, it's a negotiated element in the contract, but it's a couple $1,000s to 1% of the contract. It is negotiated, but you are almost always inside Houston going to see that earnest money necessary for you to be able to get into a contract. So the next thing is that when you look at the option period, like we talked about a second ago, you're going to hire an inspector, and that inspector is just going to come into the home and they're going to give it the once over, making sure that this is a sound home to buy. It's going to be during your option period in that 7 days, and you're going to be able to get the chance to renegotiate some items if you find anything that is like too detrimental in the mechanics of the home. That inspector is going to be a contract between you and the inspector. That inspection is going to be a contract between you and the inspector. That can cost anywhere from a couple $100 to $500 or $600. It really depends on the size of the home, the scope of the work that you want the inspector to do. And so that, again, is going to be something that you could potentially waive, yet I would say that you're going to want to have your home inspected. You're going to want to know what's behind the walls. You're going to want to have somebody who's a professional look over it and make sure it's a sound investment. Your contract with the inspector is going to be a cost that you guys come up with and that you agree upon, and you're going to pay that cost directly to that inspector. Your real estate agent is not really going to be involved inside of that space except for helping you get acclimated, get some connections, get understanding of the inspector, the inspection report. They're going to help you in that phase, but the payment that you're going to pay is going to go directly to that inspector. One of the things that will come up inside of the contract is survey. A lot of times you'll see these sellers will have a survey already ready for you to go. So they've preserved this survey. They haven't done anything to the property. They go and they sign a document with the title company and say, hey, this is a survey. Everything is the same thing. And the title company looks at it and says, well, this is good. Well, there are times, and often actually, when you don't see that survey as a good copy or that they're not able to use it. And so then there is the cost to the survey. This is another negotiated element inside of the contract, but sometimes the buyer is going to see that as their cost. And so when you look at that as your cost for the survey, a survey could cost anywhere from $400 to $500. Yet if you have a lot of acreage, you're going to see that survey jump up. I've seen surveys cost $6,000 for a big acreage property. Understanding that survey could end up as a cost to you, you just need to be aware of it, because a lot of times a title company will require that survey to be paid for before the closing table. So that's not always a cost that's going to come at the closing table. Sometimes you're going to see that needing to come out of your account before it gets to the closing. HOA is another cost that's going to come into that space. Most of the homes that are sold inside of Houston, they're going to have an HOA, so a homeowners association. There's going to be some sort of association that you've got to pay to be able to get documents transferred and all that stuff. Most of the time you're going to see that cost kind of split inside of that seller buyer space. It is another negotiated element, and so you can certainly have a seller pay for all of it. You can certainly have a buyer pay for all of it. You just need to be aware of what does that look like for you. When you get to your contract and when you're going through that contracting phase, how much am I going to potentially have to pay to make sure that the HOA is transferred properly into my name and that I have everything that I need to make sure that that is satisfied and it is paid for. So HOA is going to be another cost that you just got to be aware of. You got to be ready for if it is a cost that you have to incur as a buyer. The last two costs are going to come inside of a mortgage. And now, if you're not really familiar with what it looks like to get into the mortgage process, I've got another video that I'm going to link over here. And so if you click over here, once I get that video linked, you're going to see that I'm going to walk you through understanding a little bit more about mortgage. I'll connect you to a mortgage lender who has a better understanding to be able to teach you that space. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what that looks like. Again, if you need that, it's going to be over here and you're welcome to click through that. But the last two things in that list is going to be your down payment and your closing cost. And so your down payment is a cost that's going to come out of your pocket. And that is an agreement between you and the mortgage company. And your down payment can be anywhere between 3.5% to whatever you want it to be. You can put as much cash as you want into the closing of your home. It's between you and your mortgage lender to be able to go through that process and understand what's going to be the best case scenario for you. How much do you really need to put down? Inside of that down payment space, though, you have to have the funds and you have to be able to come to the table with those funds. There are certain times and certain ways in which you can have that gifted. It can be gifted from time to time. It's going to be between you and your lender. There are certain loan products where you don't actually have to have a down payment inside of that space. And again, those are all going to be conversations between you and your lender, and yet you've got to be ready for that cash to be able to close your home if it is indeed a cost that you incur. And then the last thing is going to be closing costs. There's always going to be costs associated, fees associated with title, fees associated with your lender, fees associated with a myriad of things. And so you've got to be ready just to have some of those closing cost elements covered. There's a way to look at all of those bits and pieces the whole way through to make sure that you understand what it looks like. You shouldn't be caught off guard. You should be having these conversations within that 30 days. You just need to be aware of what it looks like to be able to take your funds and be able to go to the closing table and not have any hiccups. Just being aware of the cost that it takes to be able to go from start to finish really is an important piece of the puzzle. And so these are some of the main elements. Most of them are negotiable, but yet they are all almost always some sort of cost that will be incurred by a buyer inside of the transaction. So thanks for sharing with me, and welcome from my home to yours. We'll see you later.